My name is Jan Sýkora. I work as an associated professor at the Institute of Asian Studies at Charles University. I'm Japanologist and economist by profession, and my field of study is the contemporary Japanese society, particularly the economic history and the broader economic and social context of the problems nowadays Japan is challenging. The Japanese policy towards Europe must be taken into broader historical context. When we look back on the pre-war Japan, there were very close relations between the Japan and the various European countries. But in the post-war period, Japan was under the strong influence of the United States because Japan was occupied by the occupation army, particularly led by the US army. And Japan became under the strong influence, as I mentioned, in the realm of politics and economics. And the position of Japan towards the Europe was, say, rather weak, because Europe, as the whole world, was divided into two blocks, and the free democratic world and the so-called socialist or communist world. And the orientation of Japan was not so strong towards the Europe as a bloc, as the regional, hegemon. But the situation was dramatically changed in the post-Cold War period, because Japan was forced to diversify their political and economic orientation, and they naturally look for the partners in the other in the other part of the world. And since the 90s, we can see the change, reorientation of the Japanese politics and the economics towards more or less towards Europe. So when we look at the perspective of Japanese policy towards Europe, I mean that they are very strongly diversified, and they look for the strong contact with the second, largest and strongest regional integration in the world. Since 90s, Japan is challenging a pile of problems, both on domestic and international level. And Japan, as the developed country, has to challenge, for example, the problem of aging society with all these problems, like for example, the labor market problem, the problem of growing budget deficit, and also the problem of on the international level is the problem of the role of Japan in the regional and global context, because on the regional context, Japan lost their position as a regional hegemon, particularly since the threat of the centuries. And in the global context, more or less, the role of China is now discussed in all over the world, and Japan seems to be pushed outside from the scene. So they definitely look for the new perspective and new partners, not only in Europe, but also in the region of Pacific and South Asia. Japan is now trying to occupy the position of the hegemon in the local context, particularly in the context of the bloc of countries in the South Asia and Pacific region. And to form some economic and political opposition, and also the military opposition against the growing power of China. Well, honestly speaking, I mean that particularly the role of so-called Central or former Eastern Europe was not so highly appreciated in Japanese foreign and economic policy. But the situation dramatically changed since the late 90s when Czech Republic or the other V4 countries just was prepared for joining of EU. So they changed their position or policy towards so-called Central Europe countries and took this region as a gate to EU. So that's why we can see the growing investment activity of Japanese business in Czechia and in other V4 countries. But on the political, as a political agenda, Japan is focusing more or less on the V4 countries as a one bloc, and they prefer to negotiate with the V4 countries than with the individual countries in the region.